Welcome back to the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast. Today, my guest is Brendan Callahan. Brendan Callahan is the head lacrosse coach at Dartmouth University. This is actually a very good friend of mine. We've known each other for over a decade. We were actually college roommates at Stony Brook University. We both played goalie. He is a tremendous athlete and even better coach, being the youngest lacrosse coach for Division I history when he was appointed the head coaching job at Dartmouth University. We got to chat about all sorts of things today, and I am really appreciative for him coming on the podcast and sharing some of his knowledge about Division I lacrosse, about coaching, about leadership, accountability, and all things in between. Guys, if you like today's podcast, please subscribe, rate, review, share it with your friends, and enjoy my interview with Brendan Callahan. I am here with Brendan Callahan. Brendan, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Sean. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much for having me. Wait a second, that's not right. Thank you very much for being on. Obviously, I'm very well versed at this, apparently, from my intro here. But for the listeners, obviously, and through the intro, you know a little bit about Brendan, but you may not know that Brendan and I were actually college. Would you call it housemates? I guess, Brendan.
I think we were a lot of things, but housemates, teammates. We spent a lot of time together. You're doing a lot of different things. So we go way back.
For sure. It's very interesting. I think for the last couple, maybe 2 or 3 years, I've headed up to the Northeast for the Maverick Cascade Showtime lacrosse show. I mean, it's got so many words to it. It's just too much. But yeah, there's a lacrosse showcase up in Western Connecticut. And I think about 2 or 3 years ago, we kind of rekindled and saw each other, and almost like a pilgrimage every year we see each other. But this year I was like, Brendan, would you like to come on to the podcast? And he was like, hey, I'll do more than the podcast if you want me to.
Sure.
We'll leave that for another time. But Brendan, how long have you been coaching college lacrosse now?
Sure. Well, first thing I'll say is I'm a big fan of the podcast and all the work that you're doing. I actually have watched it and followed it. So I'm excited to be on and contribute and share. And I appreciate the mission that you're doing, trying to help others through the experience that you're having. And I'm on a similar mission. So I'm excited to be able to, to share and be on it today.
I really appreciate that, Brendan.
Yeah. And I forgot what your question was. So if you could go.
So Brendan, how long have you been coaching college lacrosse, and maybe talk a little bit about how you transitioned from being a college lacrosse player to a college lacrosse coach?
Sure. So leaving Stony Brook 2007, I knew I wanted to be a coach and work with people of some kind. I seemed to have always have gravitated towards that, and had a positive reaction from people when I was coaching them and working with them in a lot of those ways. So I didn't know what way that was going to take, and I happened to connect with somebody who had been our former assistant coach, Kevin Cassis, who's now the head coach at Lehigh, and said, hey, how do you get into coaching? It's not like other professions. Not everybody needs somebody all the time. How does it work? And he said, by the way, I'm looking at this job, and I think that you'd be good for our graduate assistant spot. So I thought that would be a good way to get my feet wet in it. I'd also have a chance to get a master's degree in education in case I wanted to be in the classroom instructor there. So I did that, and that's what sort of got me going into it. And now I've been doing it since then. So it's 2019, and 2007 was my first summer. So this is my 12th summer, in this line of work.
So, the Malcolm Gladwell idea, 10,000 hours, do you think you've accumulated that much time yet in the field?
Yeah, I actually I have read some of his stuff. I love his stuff. And when I read it and I heard that, the first thing I thought, I said, man, what have I done in my life for 10,000 hours? And the one thing
this is a PG podcast there,
Brendan. Yeah. The one thing that from a on the field standpoint, I know that I've done is I've definitely watched 10,000 hours of film in my life. My dad was a coach, both youth football and high school football coach, and sitting in film sessions, coaches meetings. When I think back to the path that I'm leading now, I think a lot of it started there. Listening to him, how he ran meetings or was involved in meetings and being on the headsets. I spent just about every Friday night for a good chunk of my young life there, in a press box once I was old enough. And I wasn't allowed to go to away games because I'd get home too late, but I was allowed to go to, all the home games. And, So watching the film, that's kind of been, my thing. So the strategic, seeing the game, seeing things before they happen, that part comes really natural to me. And that's the piece of it is you look through what I've done and kind of set me up for what I'm, doing now, that mind thinking about the game, whether it was football, lacrosse. Gave basketball a shot for a while, but being 5'10", that only lasted for so long.
Yeah, it sounds very much akin to one of your Baltimore faithfuls, Jim Harbaugh, and John Harbaugh, in terms of the watching the film, with their dad. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's, as a kid, you always look up to your parents and what they're doing, no matter what it is, and that just to be happened what my dad did, and he had a passion for it. That's what he was doing on the side. That wasn't a full-time thing for him, and I see that a lot with guys that are coaching that aren't doing it full-time like us, or doing a lot of like what you're doing, where you're helping out as you can, and it's a lot of time and hours regardless, but I just remember very fondly those memories and being in the locker room with the players after the game and being a water boy. And, there was always just such good excitement and good energy and for that. And, I had a lot of coaches too that, when I got a little bit older, my family had split up, and I had some coaches at that point in my life that kind of took me under their wing, and would have me over the house on Friday nights, before games, when dad wasn't around or mom was at work. She was working night shift as a nurse in Washington, D.C. And there were some coaches that took me in. So when I had a chance to get a little bit older, I said, man, those guys have given me so much. I've gotten an education. I've gone places and done things as a part of this game and other sports that and I would love to give back in some kind of way, like these people that I was around, whether my parents or these other coaches. So that was sort of my inspiration for getting into it and getting going with it.
Yeah, I definitely can. That resonates with me as well. Obviously, my parents were working a lot or weren't around at times. Especially when I was younger. But I think sports are one of those things that give you an outlet. I mean, it's something to do after school. You have such a built-in community that rarely do you see in a lot of other areas, especially as you're growing up. But, were there any coaches particularly influential on your upbringing that you would want to highlight, or experiences within that?
Yeah, I mean, there was two guys just in those younger days. There's a guy named Mike Francis, who's now the head football coach at Meade High School down in Anne Arundel County in Maryland. He's also been a head basketball coach at Old Mill. His son AJ Francis, followed me to Gonzaga, where I went to high school, and then played in the NFL for a little while. He's just a massive man. His son was. So, he was a guy who had been through a lot in life, and for him, it was as much about. We had a bunch of knuckleheads in our youth football teams, and he was as much about making sure that we did everything right off the field and were good men. As we were learning the X's and O's on the field. So I think he was a big influence on me. I know he's still doing the same thing down there now for those guys that are coming up. And he was a prodigy of Chuck Markowitz, who was a legendary Anne Arundel County football coach, that my dad had worked with him. And he was always having me around water boy. Even if I got older in high school, he'd let me come work out with their team in the mornings before I would go work out with my own team. So again, just some guys like that at impressionable ages that took an interest in you, that cared about you, as a man and as a player. And, when you do that, I think in any field, it means a lot to the people that you work with. So those were some of the guys there. And then my uncle Mike, obviously my dad and my uncle Mike, he coached me growing up, and he's just a tough, hard-nosed, passionate guy about everything that he does. And, I took some of those pieces, from him as well.
So knowing that now, and obviously we kind of briefly touched on this, when we talked before, earlier in the month or late last month. Do you take those, teachings with you, and in what ways do you do that now, being the head coach of Dartmouth Lacrosse?
Yeah. And I think that, you talk about those early influences, and then you add those on to some names that you've heard in our sport. I mentioned Kevin Cassis at Lehigh, who had a big impact on me. From him, I take the culture. he was as much about building the culture as it was the X's and the O's. I had a chance to play for, Coach Rick Soul while I was at Stony Brook. I know you did as well. And just some of the ways he approached, the game as far as the fitness and the hard work and the level of intensity that you needed to train with. You take those things from him. Lars Tiffany, who just won a national championship at Virginia, coached us at Stony Brook as well. And, you take the smarts and the creativity and the fun. So you take some of the care and some of the interest that you take in people's lives and building men, and then you add that with some of those things that you take from some of my mentors in the college game. And I think that's who I am, right? You take the smarts and some of the X's and O's and the way he thinks about the game from Lars Tiffany, the culture and the way that Kevin Cassis approaches his business, the toughness, the training, the mentality, from a guy like Rick Soul with wanting to build good men, and be more than just a coach, from those guys I had growing up. And that's the combination of what I'm living out today.
For sure. One thing that comes to mind is, knowing those names, knowing those coaches. At times, in an objective way, for me, I look at those instances, and sometimes I felt that it wasn't about the team as much as it was the coach and like what they wanted to do and what, not accepting what was actually in front of them. I mean, I remember times where I think it was Coach Soul where he goes, "Listen, we're not beating the Syracuse, okay? We're not gonna do it. It's just not us. But if we play our best today and they don't have a good day, we could surprise them. We could shock them." You know what I mean?
Sure.
That was my best Rick Soul impression. And if that sounded horribly not good or racist, I apologize. But he does sound like that. Anyway, how do you make it not about you? I mean, you're the head honcho. All roads lead to Brendan Callahan. How do you make that not about you?
I tell you what, that is a great question, and that's one that I've been working through in my process now, being a head coach, because I'm 100% on board with you that you are responsible. What we try to practice here, as we call it, and there's a great book called Extreme Ownership.
Jacko.
Jacko. And so we try to practice extreme ownership. I believe in that because I am responsible at the end of the day for everything that happens or doesn't happen in this program. And I fully accept that. And that comes with sitting in this seat that I sit in. And at the same time, you have to realize that you actually don't have control over a lot of the things that happen right in front of you.
Yeah.
So that balance and that question that you have there is, I think, for a guy in my role, the number one thing that you have to try to figure out in your way for who you are as a person that you have to try to figure out is how do you do that? So I think the biggest, this is where sort of my meditation and some of my mindfulness practices have come in is to try to deal with this. And one of the things that I've learned through some of those practices is just acceptance. Okay. I'm accepting that this is where I am right now. I'm accepting that I am responsible. And I'm also going to accept the fact that I'm not in control, fully in control. Because when things happen and when you see coaches lose their mind, when you see coaches, saying things like you just referenced there with Coach Soul, it's because you desperately are trying to hold on. It's like picking up a handful of sand. And the more tightly you try to grab it and the tighter you try to hold on to it, the more and the faster it's going to slip through your fingers. So the tighter that you try to hold the team, the tighter that you try to control every aspect of everything that's around you in the world, the faster that it's going to fall through your fingers. So I try to remember that. I try to hold on to that. And then it's the art of trying to influence, the guys that you do have. So it's sitting down with them and saying, hey, what do you want to accomplish this week against Syracuse? What is it? What do you think? What do you guys think that we can do? And then you try to help their mindset get to the place that you want it to be. And at the end of the day, if you can't get it there because they really don't want to get there, and for us, our jobs are on the line. You don't win enough games and your culture's not good enough and guys aren't having a good enough experience and all those things that you can't really control pop up, then I don't have a job. And at the same time, I don't have any control over that. So that's the really, really interesting dynamic about being a coach. And the world does not see it that way. And I get that, but it's really interesting.
Very, very interesting that you have this mindset, yet if you were an average person looking at what the intricacies of what coaching are all about and building young men, and now, obviously in your case, like men, you don't, it's almost like society doesn't give you that room
No,
for that, right?
absolutely not. Yep, absolutely not. There isn't that, that room, because they're looking at you saying that no, you are supposed to have control over these kids. It's the same thing too. I have a 7 and a 3-year-old, and I'm walking through the airport with them, today, and people are thinking your parents are supposed to have control over those 2 little kids. I have no control over them. I can set lines and I can set standards. No, you can't hit a stranger walking through. But if he wants to turn around and hit somebody, he's going to do it, and he's probably going to do it before I can stop him. You know. So again, it's to set, hey, okay, now that's a learning opportunity, right? Okay, it's a learning opportunity. So the same thing. So you just have to accept that's where society's at and be okay with it. And, I've got to that place because, we weren't very good when I got here, and it was going to take some time, looking at what I was looking at, staring in the face. It was in the midst of early recruiting. So to have the impact of guys when you're recruiting freshmen and sophomores, and they're going to be 3 years away from campus, and then they're going to be freshmen and sophomores again when they get here. And then you're looking at 6-7 years down the road, and you're not going to be able to change a whole lot today. You're going to do everything you can to move as far forward as you can. But you can't. So I said, either I'm going to lose my mind, and need to go get medicated, or I got to figure out how to accept this and do the best I can with what we got, and keep it moving forward, and keep influencing and keep being a positive role model, despite the circumstances around you right now.
For sure. It's interesting that, as humans, and I'll get a little bit more deeper and philosophical here there, Brendan, we'll take a hard right here, that when we look at nature, for the most part, things don't happen in 10 minutes or even hours or even days. Like when you look at, I've heard this analogy used many a time before, but like most people don't realize about olive trees. Olive trees take 100 years for them to bear fruit. So if you were to plant an olive tree, maybe your grandkids would bear the fruit.
Yes.
Right. And,
yep.
And how, so obviously what I'm trying to get at here is you're not going to change a program in a year, 2 years, et cetera. It's going to take almost a full class, and sometimes it makes a couple of classes to start moving in the right direction. If you have the ability to, we'll talk about how do you sell that without showing, national championships. But the other thing is, how do you see that within yourself, and how do you judge that progress as the guy in charge?
Yeah. And I can tell you again, another great question, because it's been one of my biggest internal struggles. There when you're in a performance-based world and business, and it's one of the things our guys struggle with the most too. They get to Dartmouth, a place like this, by getting A's, and doing a lot of things, right. It's the result that ends up getting them here. But what they forget about is the hours that their parents spent with them sitting at the kitchen table doing flashcards as a little kid. Right. Yeah. So as humans, like what we're trained to do, what's our best asset? If you think about what helps us to develop is the fact that once we've learned a skill, this is how we survived back when we were in our primitive days, right? Once we learn a skill, how to do something, it becomes second nature to us. We don't have to think about it anymore. And we don't remember the time that we put in to have that become second nature, and how to, swing a hammer. You just go swing a hammer, because now you can be alert to the tiger that might be coming at you, or the lion, or whatever else is coming, because it's second nature to you. So that's the thing that if we can, try to remember, is that while those things seem so important to us, hey, you're responsible for this, or it's this result or that result. Well, the result is just a byproduct. It's just the end of that 100 years of growth that it takes to produce the fruit. But once you're producing fruit, as humans, we don't then think about the 100 years that it took to do it. All we know that it's the fruit that's coming, and then we forget about it. So, I try not to blame people that are putting that pressure on you. I try not to take that. That's where you have to let all those things go, because that is our human nature, and we just forget about it. And every once in a while, a good reminder about that's how things actually work. And everywhere in that's how it is. That's the way it is. There's no way around that. So how as people in this world we have today, we came to, start putting B before A, I don't know. I don't know. And I'm hopeful that now where I'm sitting as a coach and a parent, I do think the pendulum eventually will swing back the
Mm-hmm.
other direction, and we'll start remembering, where we came from.
Yeah.
But it comes down to awareness, right? I think the more awareness we can help to spread, about ourselves and the way that things are,
Yeah.
the better off we're all going to be. We'll stop driving ourselves crazy, 100 different ways.
For sure. There's a saying, uh, good times build soft people make hard times make strong men, and so on and so forth. You know what I mean? Like
Sure.
it cycles. And I think a lot of it is cyclical, but I think what you really pointed out that really is helpful is the idea of awareness. So there's a reason why you're constantly looking, in high school, you look at history books and you look at the men and women that helped out in World War II, because you wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for that. Like some people had to look and go, yeah, this sucks right now, but the only way we're going to go forward is if we embrace this suck.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely.
Now, how do you
Absolutely. Yeah.
convey that
Right.
to young individuals
Right.
who, in a lot of ways, and I use this, I don't use this like the kids that I talk to in high school. I mean, they're kids. Most of them are on assisted living or on some kind of government assistance. A lot of them, and some aren't. So because it's a very diverse school, but how do you, for your particular individuals you work with, how do you sell that to kids that, for probably the most part, I would say, really haven't had it all that hard?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and listen, as I'm talking here, I'm not talking as an expert in this at this point of my career. I am talking to somebody who's going through the journey and learning day by day, with you here. So, one of the things that happened at the end of this spring, as I'm talking about the same thing, and the word you used there was sell. How do you sell this to them?
How do you package it? That's what I always look for.
Right.
Tell me how to package it, Brendan.
Yeah, tell me how to package it. And so what I have learned working with a bunch of smart guys who, they're not going to get sold unless they want to get sold. Right. That's basically the group that I work with.
For sure.
And that's why they're going to go on and be great leaders and great men and run a lot of great businesses and do those things. But the challenge is they're not going to get sold unless they want to get sold. So deeper than the cell level, when you're saying working with people and how do you help them to explain and understand the importance of what somebody did in World War II, is that you have to get to their current belief system. And this comes, from one of my uncles that I talked to at the end of the season, and I was asking him some questions about the same stuff. And he's had a chance to run and be high up at a couple big corporations and some high level leadership positions and work with some high level leaders, Colin Powell and guys like that. And, what he said to me, he said, Brendan, is you have to get to them at the belief level, right? So when you see somebody who you're talking to, and whether it's bringing up these examples of history or these other things you're trying to imply to coach, you have to sit them down and figure out what it is that they believe. Right. So if somebody doesn't believe that what happened in World War II and what those men went through is important for whatever reason, you could try to tell them that it's important all you want. But until you get to what they do think is important about where they stand today, you won't be able to move them from where they're at. So I think that's the thing. When you see that the stuff that you're selling or the stuff that you're doing isn't working, is you're going to have to backtrack, sit down, backtrack with them. Get to a place of okay, well, what do you believe? Where are you right now? I had every Thursday morning or every other Thursday we had what we called our leadership council, and I'd bring in different articles or different things, and we talk about leadership and talk about our team and talk about the stuff that's happening and growth opportunity for us. And once this year I used military examples because I think you talk about leadership in the military.
For sure.
And I think leadership is absolutely transferable. Obviously we're not going out and we don't have lives on the line. We're playing lacrosse, right? But the leadership skills that are learned in the military and done at such a high level because there are lives on the line can absolutely be transferable. Now I brought that into the group and said it like that. And we went through doing some of these readings, and we get to our end of the year review meetings. And one of the guys looks at me in the face and goes, Coach, listen, all that military stuff, again, I think he was just speaking for himself, but it doesn't work. It doesn't resonate. It's not it's not good, and you can leave that stuff at home. And in fact, getting us up early on a Thursday to do this stuff is a complete waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, well, clearly he doesn't see and understand and things here, and there's nothing that I'm going to sell to him that's going to affect where he's at today. All right, so I got to let him cool off, and then at some point we're going to sit down and figure out what he does think is important in leadership. Right? What do you think is important in leadership? What kind of examples? Who do you follow? Who do you look at in your world that you think is important? And try to touch him from where he's at.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Obviously, one, you've got to pick your, stuff up off the ground after hearing something like that. Because I mean, for me personally, if I'm putting my heart and soul into something, and I have someone come at me who I probably care about giving me that, I mean, it feels like a gut punch, probably, right?
Yeah. That's where that mindfulness really helps out. That it's not personal. But yeah, absolutely. When you're trying hard and all you want to do is help these guys to be better leaders and better, and you really care, and they're like, no, it's just, yeah, absolutely. It can be that gut punch that, now I can say that I've had and seen that type of experience so many times in my short amount of time here that it's no longer a gut punch. It's just, it's just a reality. And okay, let's figure out how to move forward. But I can tell you 5 years ago, it was, are you kidding me? And I would then try to hammer harder, right? I would grip the sand a little bit tighter and say, it didn't work. Right.
Yeah.
It didn't work. So, now I try to use a simple equation that I got from Bill Belicheck. He was doing an interview with Paul Rabel on their podcast.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, on Paul Rabel's first podcast there, and he said this, kind of a simple equation is, okay, what am I doing? How am I talking to people? What drills are we doing? What are we running? What type of leadership stuff are we doing? And what's it giving us? What's it giving us out the other side of the equation? And do you like that or not? Right. And if there's something that's not equaling up to what it should, then there's an issue there that you got to go back and work through. So for me, what's important, where have I gotten myself to? How does that not feel like a gut punch anymore? Is using that equation and saying, at the end of the day, I want to be an effective leader with these guys. That's it. Okay. So if the military examples is as important as I think that is, and as much as I think that we can learn from that, I want to be effective at a higher level than I want to impart my own beliefs in the importance of, what the military does for us.
So I think that calls back to what we were talking about earlier, not making it about you, right? So if it's about you, it's like, well, it's either my way or the highway.
Absolutely.
In which case it's about the message that person didn't resonate with. However, if you're like, wait a second, what is it about this situation that's trying to speak to me? Well, maybe it's not everybody's going to believe what you believe. And maybe it's time to open your ears and hear this person out. And are they willing to meet you in a place where, like, hey, something has to change within this organization? And if you're open to that, I'm open I'm open to hear what you think about it. Like, what do you think is going to put us in the right direction? However, if they're like, well, I just want to hang on to what I believe, and hearing you say these things challenges that, then I think we have a disconnect.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. You hit it on the head.
That's my prescription for my couch. There's a fantastic author. She's blowing up more and more. I think she's probably got like over 1 million followers on Instagram now. She's got a Netflix special. And I know it sounds weird to mention this in the sport of lacrosse or in male dominated professions, but Brene Brown, who preaches about vulnerability. And she has a little checklist that she has. It's called the Engaged Feedback Checklist. And a couple of things that she talks about is, I'm ready to sit down next to you rather than across from you. You know what I mean? Like something like that. Like, are you ready to actually have a conversation? Because I'll tell you right now, like the first few times that I've had these awkward conversations with people, I don't want to sit next to you. I want to yell at you. And I imagine for you, you almost had to step through that uncomfortability a few times in order for you to know, like, hey, I'm alive on the other side and I'm still breathing. Now I can actually like coach effectively, I imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think that that's one of the other things that, we struggle with right now is that, because we try to make everything so comfortable and we're so, conflict adverse or been taught not to express ourselves in some of those things, that you don't get that chance to step through to the other side, of that. There's a quote that I keep on my board right behind my desk. I'm turning around looking at it now, and it's from the Buddhist teacher Pema Chandran.
Pema, yes.
Yeah, and it says, his quote is, "Only to the extent that we expose ourselves over and over to annihilation can that which is indestructible be found in us." So that sits above my desk every day, because again, it's putting yourself out there, it's doing it, it's walking through those experiences. The universe, the world around us is an unbelievable teacher if we'll let it teach us.
Yeah. And I'm going to blow your mind. Pema Chodron is a woman.
There you go.
Now we learn something new every day.
There you go.
I listen. The only reason I know that is I listened to like a book on tape from her. And,
Okay.
Yeah, fantastic Buddhist type stuff, mindfulness and that kind of thing. I really do appreciate, and I guess this is confirmation bias, that you are turning toward, introspective looks. I mean, I don't think when I was coming up, I never saw any of my coaches looking inward to change the world around them. Where do you think that comes from for you?
Wow. Great question. Again, you're killing it with the questions here.
I'm the armchair quarterback, my man.
Yeah. Where does it come from? I don't know. I think a lot of it comes from my faith background, that I've had, through the years, and, and then that feeling of, I'm trying to find the word for it that I'm searching for. I wouldn't say it's giving up, but it's having enough times gone through it where you're like, okay, I can't control every circumstance that's around me, which is what most people try to do. I
think they call that like surrender almost.
Surrender. Yeah, that's it. Yep. So it comes from a sense of surrender, that's inside that, okay, I don't know what to do. Where should I go, with this? And, saying my prayers and asking for help from a spiritual level. And a lot of that was, well, you need to give up and work on yourself. I felt like it was one of those things that was given to me, as I was reflecting and meditating, of you need to give up and work on yourself. And what I found, which has absolutely been the most fun thing of this journey I've been on in the last however many years here, is that when I work on myself and I change myself, to be better, or to let go of some of these things, the environment around me changes without me having to do anything.
Yeah, for sure. It's almost like mind changing matter.
Yeah.
Instead of matter changing matter, which is I'm going to push through and I'm going to pound as hard as I can. And when there's nothing left, I'm going to keep going.
Right.
Which is, again, like, I think there's times for that, you know what I mean? But I obviously bias toward the latter of the two, just because of the experiences that I've gone through in my life. So I imagine for an individual who has shown unrelenting, like, smash my head through the wall kind of thinking, that probably resonates more with them. Whereas I think, people who have had experiences where they've been broken down to a point where they really can't move anymore, there is no more moves, there is only surrender, it becomes a lot more different. Are there any experiences that you've had personally, Brendan, that have kind of shown you that, like, hey man, you're not in control anymore?
Yeah, I mean, 3 or 4 different of those, enlightenment, spiritual, type of experiences at different kind of key points throughout my life, starting in my young adulthood, then again as a teenager, then again as my time when my first son came, and then again there was another day, I can remember almost the days and time in particular, when those moments happened, and each one was kind of like a way I would describe it is the clouds parting and the sun coming out, and just that feeling of, again, or a little voice in the back of your head saying, it's not in your hands, it's in my hands, and And, because I think that, I mean, there's a piece of us that's here and is physical, and there's a piece of us that's here and is non-physical. Right. And each of those pieces are just as important. And the more that we can, connect with that and allow that to help, be a big part of us, the better off that we're going to be. So, yeah, I mean, it's been a fun journey, especially as a coach. I think sometimes the guys look at me like I got about 7 heads when I start talking about something. But what they will notice, and I had my boss just tell me this at the end of this year, is one of the changes I made from last year to this year, and a lot of this letting go that I did on the field. I had a much more enjoyable experience. They had a much more enjoyable experience, and it was reflected in the end of the year reviews about how good of experience a lot of the players had this year, and the notice of how much I changed. Right. How much I changed in even just the last year. And that's become now a staple for our program, is that growth and development, is that it's not okay to sit still. Whatever way you have to do it, if it's a spiritual journey for you, if it's an intellectual journey for you, again, I'm not going to tell other people what kind of journey they need to be on, because of what I'm on, but, seeing that from the guys and seeing the change in coach, I think is something that from a player's perspective, they can open up the change and a lot of the credibility that you said that maybe you lost with some of your coaches, or I lost with some of my coaches, because, we're sitting there as players screaming, saying, Coach, we need some change. We need some things to be a little bit different. And having it being a wall where you aren't going to come sit next to the guy, and having somebody, at the top who will come sit next to you and say, okay, where is it that we need to go? That's what I would like to be, as a coach.
Yeah, that's and it's also a very challenging position to be in, because I think as coaches, we want to be looked up toward. You know what I mean? We want to be that in an egoic way, the head honcho. But I think what we're seeing nowadays, and especially from the top down, like you look at, like you listen to some of the generals that are in the military and what they talk about. It's like, yo, eat with your troops. I don't care if you're a 5-star general, you eat with your troops. You know what I mean? You're there, as much as they are. Now, obviously there's you have to take responsibility of stuff. You can't just be like, oh, I'm just like these guys, because guess what? They're looking to you for guidance. Right. They're looking you to delegate. You know what I mean? That's kind of what that position is. But for real growth in a program, I think, and growth nowadays, I think because we have so much information nowadays, and you see how the world kind of works a little easier, especially because we have access to, an unlimited amount of information at our fingertips with our phones. Kids look at that kind of stuff and they make a decision very quickly of like, do I want this or do I not want this? Do I want somebody on my team, or am I battling against somebody? And I imagine that you have to probably interact with that on a pretty regular basis.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Especially like I said to you, when the group that we have here at Dartmouth, and I'm sure similar in a lot of the other Ivy Leagues, very strong-minded, strong-willed, types of people. And they're not just going to do something. They're not going to say go because you say go.
Yes. That's what I'm kind of alluding to.
Yeah. It's just not going to happen that way. Now the real challenge for us now as coaches, and I'm sure leaders with this group that's coming up, is that, hey, why, even if you've got a name, even if you've been doing it for X amount of years, even if you are titled the head coach, why should I listen to you? I can go on YouTube, right, and I can pull up drills on how to do shooting from from some of the top players in the world. So why should I listen to your shooting drill? Or why should I listen to anything that you say? My club coach was all world and, taught me this and that. And what are you? So our job has certainly become more challenging, in that way of just, what it to me, I heard this from Bill O'Brien, who's the head coach at, he's the head coach for the Houston Texans now. He said that when he was with the Patriots and he was working with Tom Brady, he said, I was walking into the room, into a meeting every day with a guy who was as smart or smarter than me as far as the things that I'm teaching, the drills we're doing, and the plays and what we're running. And he said, that made me such a better coach because I had to be really on top of my stuff or I was going to lose respect, for the guy that I'm working with. So I think now as a coach, again, if you're not on top of your game, if you're not growing and developing, if you're not on top of the new drills and what, Paul Rabel's teaching on YouTube, and the guys are coming in and feeling like your stuff's not as good or not as helpful as theirs, It's a problem. It's a problem.
Yeah.
And I think that also leads into the second problem, which is there is so many voices for the kids and people right now. Is who do I listen to? Do I listen to YouTube? Do I listen to coach?
Yeah.
Do I listen to my parents? Do I listen to my peers? They're getting pulled, or they're hearing things in so many different directions that, again, for them, it's a choice of, am I going to listen to you?
So, obviously there's a lot of, people who listen to this podcast, and I imagine some of them are coaches, some of them are youth coaches. What are some strategies that you use so that your voice in some ways is the loudest for these, for young individuals?
Yeah. I think it goes back to what we've been talking about, is that it's, you got to know your stuff. You have to know that they care about you and that you are on their team. Hey, I want to see the best for you. Right. And what I would call it in communication, and I'm trying to come up with a word for it. Maybe you can help me.
Yeah.
I call it it's a triangular, communication method, right? Versus a direct method, versus do this because I'm me and I'm the coach and I say you should do it and I'm smart and I know good drills and I know this, right? It's kind of if you and I were sitting face to face and we're in a line, and I could hold my hand up over here on the side and say, let's say it's a contract, or let's say it's an agreement, or let's say it's a standard of what we're going to do here, right? So the way that I try to do it is it's a triangular communication style, which say, okay, if you're going to sign up to play for me in this program as a youth coach, we are going to teach shooting overhand to the low corner. That's what I've seen. That's what I believe in. There's a lot of ways to get it done. But if you'd like to play on this team and be a part of this program, right, shooting overhand to the low corners is what we're gonna teach. Now, if you don't, the chance that you're sitting on the side for more time than the guy next to you, is probable. Right. So you kind of lay all that out on the front end. And now, again, that thing that's over here on the side, that's not me to you. So when you shoot, high out of bounds, you hear coaches losing their mind. Put it in a low corner, Johnny. And you're like, hey, remember what we talked about? Okay, this is how we shoot in our program. Right. Yeah. It's just, hey, we are both I'm trying to help you.
Yeah.
Right. And this is what we've agreed upon over here that's gonna help you. And now, let's go and look at that and do that and try to keep moving. So if you can find those things as a coach or a parent, or even that thing that's just kind of like greater than the two of you, hey, that could be as simple, that kind of triangular communication, as simple as, hey, do you understand that I'm trying to help you be the best player that you can be? Yes, coach. Can we agree on that? Yes. Okay. So if we're going to agree on that, and that we're both pointed in the same direction now, what do you think about shooting to the low corner?
Yeah, for sure. I think maybe like a communication triad might be a nice little word for it.
Yeah, the communication triad.
Yeah,
and I've seen it be really effective.
But what I really find impactful is the idea of these open-ended questions. Like, you're inquisitive, you're curious. I think that is a lot more beneficial, my bias, than telling somebody. Because when they're engaging, it becomes a lot more about them. It becomes a lot more about them, empowering them to make new decisions. Because I think one of the things, especially in younger kids, is that they don't realize that they can make a decision. They are very much kind of a little boat in a storm, and they're just trying to keep themselves upright.
Sure.
But the more that you empower young individuals to say, hey, no, you did that not because, because someone put a gun to your head. You did it because it was your choice. So you chose to be late to practice. You chose to shoot in that way. You choose these things. Now, you also have to balance that out, that kids are nudniks and they don't know that they don't know.
Right.
You know what I mean? And even if they know that they don't know, I really do believe that most individuals I think all individuals are doing the best they can, but they may not have the tools, they might not have the infrastructure, and they may not have the repetitions in order for them to make those concepts second natures, unconscious.
Yeah. And another technique there that I've taken on since I've been here, and this is again, I always joke around with our guys and say there's two ways to learn. We can learn through reason, or we can learn through pain. And this is one that I've learned through pain when things haven't always gone our way, my way, or guys here haven't understood. And we talk about it as communicating on both sides of the line, right? So yes, open-ended questions are great when you're in a time in practice and you can teach and you can help the guys to understand. At the same time, when a guy's about to run naked down to the backside of the goal and score, and you need to communicate with your teammate to just tell him to pick that guy up, there's no time for a discussion, right? There's no time for – so that's where you have to make sure the guys understand that, yes, this is how I would like to communicate, but the other side of the line is please know there is a time where I'm not going to be able to explain it and ask you a question, okay? It's just going to be – hey, you got cover that guy.
Yeah, like, for sure. And thinking about that example, it's very interesting because the time to talk about that was 2 months ago in practice. Like learning
absolutely.
those, like, cause like think about it this way. And we kind of use the military analogies a few times. It's like, you're only as good as your training.
Right.
Right. So if you're not working on those things, like communicating to your teammates, if you're not working on things like, seeing steps ahead, you will always default, especially when times are hard. You will always default to that kind of lowest common denominator, so to speak.
Yeah. You don't rise to the level of your competition. You fall to the level of your training. Right?
Yes. I think that's 100% accurate, and I have a million instances to prove that right.
Yeah. So the open-ended, I do think though that the open-ended questions is an unbelievable way to make sure guys understand and get them to think about what they're doing versus just being told and having them shut down. And as long as they understand, there may come a time as well during the heat of battle that we might just have to tell. I just got to tell you.
Kid gets off the sideline. When this isn't going to be a discussion, I'm telling you right now what you need to do. Go think about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? All right. And when you're ready, let's roll. But one thing that also came to mind is, and this is something that, again, we examine because there's more information now. What are your thoughts on using conditioning as punishment for athletes?
Yeah, I mean, I think the important thing is that there are standards. I think it goes down to this. As much as everybody wants to talk about, hey, we have a no timeout environment for children. We have everything's positive all the time, and that can, again, there are people learn two ways. Some people, will learn because they want to learn, but when you have a group of people and different personalities, there is some people that only learn if there is something on the line for them, a consequence or a reinforcement or, whatever you want, whatever language you want to stipulate on that. So I think that you're setting yourself up for absolute failure if there's a standard. Again, hey, we shoot overhand. We've used that example. We shoot overhand to the low corner, and that's what we do.
Yeah.
If there's nothing that ever happens to you when you don't consistently do that over and over again, eventually you're just off the rails. You can do whatever you want because some people are going to be like, all right, nothing's going to happen to me, so I'm just going to keep doing it. So as far as using conditioning for it, if that's what you choose, again, that's what you choose. It's something that I personally have used. I don't use it as much. I think it all comes down to what do you hold inside of you as a coach when you do that? If ahead of time the guys know that when we miss that low corner, if I see three guys in a row miss the low corner shooting underhand instead of overhand, we're going to stop and we're going to do something that's going to be a little bit of a reminder for us, a little bit of a refocuser towards what we've agreed that we're gonna do out here. Are you guys cool with that? Yeah, coach. And then when it happens, you're not like, you know what, you're not listening. You bunch of sons and you're using all kind of, and you throw them on the end line and you run until everybody's vomiting.
Yeah. So it's a tool. It's a matter of how you use it.
It's a
and
tool.
with what where it comes from. You're not doing it because it's coming from an angry, frustrated place. It's coming from, this was our decision. This is what we put forth as how we are going to be a better program. So we're just following through.
Right. We're just following through.
Yeah. You chose this. It wasn't me. You chose the game. The game didn't choose me.
Right. Exactly. And I do think that there's some people that don't believe in doing that. And I think that's, That's great too, because it separates, hey, running and training is something we need to do, especially in our game and in most sports, to be good. And to separate that off where it's never a negative thing. I can see that there'd be a lot of value in that. You just better have something.
Yeah, yeah. I guess, also you have to have individuals who are, like you said, like, if individuals on that team, which is a very diverse kind of deal, that you don't necessarily get to choose, like you get to choose the players in terms of their abilities, et cetera. But you may not be able to choose like this person learns like this. I think
Right.
that's maybe too far of a level for what we're trying to do. And you need to have multiple tools in the tool chest to be like, okay, well, we're not getting that lesson. So maybe we have an agreement where we go, hey, like guys, if we're not on the same page, I like how you said that we need a reminder. I like that.
A reminder. Yeah. Yep. Some other techniques there, have been pull a guy out and sit him down. Take him. I mean, guys like to play, right? Is to pull a guy to the side, for a little bit. But again, the one thing with that, it can't just be whenever you fly off the handle. It's got to be a consistent thing, so guys know what the. I think the number one thing I've seen in as you're looking to hold a team accountable, or a group accountable, is just the consistency and with what it is there. There's nothing more frustrating as a player and for me as a coach is not knowing when, or why this is happening. That's where I think as a player you go nuts. All right, coach flew off the handle. Now we're running sprints.
Yep.
This is not fun.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't even know why I'm running right now, but I'm going to run because he's telling me to do it.
Like, wait, I did the same thing last week, and he was just like, oh, you know what? You got to use this hand. And now it's a week later. I didn't use that hand, and now I'm running.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's that that scared child syndrome. But before we wrap things up, Brendan, I had one more question.
Sure.
This was brought to me by a young athlete. He's 15 years old. He has aspirations.
Okay.
He has aspirations of playing at the collegiate level, and he wanted to know what are some things that a Division I coach looks for that aren't necessarily on the stat sheets when it comes to being recruited.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a huge piece of it because a lot of this to me is what separates guys in recruiting, or once they get to, the collegiate level. And we have things that, we keep, and I got this from Coach Cassis, who probably got it from, somewhere else, is that we actually will keep stats to the things that we think, are important. And we call them a winning edge.
Okay.
Or we call them we just have these other things that we'll stat. So what is that? That's your hustle plays, right? So you see a guy with a tremendous effort play, a guy really communicating, all the little things that can help you to, win a game. So how hard does a guy play? What's the level of passion that he plays with? If a guy is playing with passion, which means he's excited to be there, he's into what he's doing, I think that's one of the biggest things. He loves to play lacrosse or loves to play whatever sport that it is. If you can see that on the field coming through him, a guy's body language and the way that they play the game will absolutely speak to you, if you're watching for it. And, so we watch those things in recruiting. What kind of teammate is he? Right? What's his body language? Your body language will tell us everything. When you come off the field, I call it your defining moment as a recruit. You go and throw a pass away. All right. Do you turn around and get a little ticked off and go try to ride the ball back and make the next play? Or do you put your head down and jog over to the substitution box and get off the field and try to hide because you don't want anybody to really pay attention to you or call you out that you just threw a pass away? Right. So when something doesn't go your way on the field, how do you react? Are you a resilient player? So effort, attitude, communication, and resiliency, would be the four things there that I would say to that young man. And just, understand those things matter. And that a lot of that comes through in your body language. They're not, and you can't put on a show. You get out there, you start getting tired, you start playing, it gets really tough to fake it. So just to know that those things are being watched as much as how many goals you scored, or how many takeaway checks you have. And I can tell you from sitting in my seat, with the stuff that comes across my desk and the way that parents and players will talk to me, I would say that 90% of the people out there don't think that that's as important, as the goals that they scored, in the course of the game. So I will take a guy who scores less goals, but plays with those intangible pieces before I'll take the guy who picked up 3 garbage goals and put them in the net and gets to tell grandma afterwards that, hey, I scored 3 goals today. Oh, isn't that great, honey? Okay, well, how did you play when you turned the pass over and then you walked around on the field? Right.
That got me to thinking about how I had a conversation with, a fairly high level strength and conditioning coach and one of the mentors that I have in terms of skill acquisition and development of athletes. And I imagine this is something that you probably have to go through as well, because you're recruiting kids, from 9th grade all the way to their senior year.
Mm-hmm.
How do you tell whether or not this player has reached their peak in high school or they have a lot of upside? Are there things that you definitely look for? Is there a checklist? Is there strategies? Or is this more of like a gut thing or a combination of the two? Because like who they are in high school, obviously they're very good, but there's no way that they're going to be able to play against the best in the country on a consistent basis if they're just high school players, right?
Right. Yep. So a lot of it comes down to this is where you get into more conversations that as you move forward with kids and you're talking with coaches and you're talking with the kid once he gets on campus for a visit, as we have a couple standard type of questions that I'll try to ask every kid that comes in, and just to gauge the level of growth mentality do they have. I heard a guy recently say that he asked a question. He's like, there's 2 things I'm looking for in a potential partner. It's, do they have a growth mentality and do they want a family? He said, so when we sit down on a date, one of the first things that I ask a potential partner is, do they believe in aliens? And I started dying laughing, and I said, why the heck would you ask that? And he said, well, if they don't believe in the possibilities of things that we're not sure of, they're not going to have a growth mindset. Right. So same type of thing with the kids is you just try to ask them questions. You try to talk to coaches and try to get at some of those intangible pieces. Are they somebody who's, just looking for a college admission spot and know that you have ability to be able to help them with that? Or are they somebody who really wants to get better? And usually if you find the guys at this level are the guys that work and the guys that have a growth mindset or growth mentality. So if you're a worker, you'll put the time and effort in because you love the game. Maybe that's why. Or you're just really excited about getting better. I mean, there's a lot of motivations for it, but if you have that growth mindset and you're a guy that'll work, I mean, that absolutely separates guys at the next level, because you could have a lot of potential as far as you're 6'5" and could use to put on some weight, but if you're not going to do the work or you don't want to, what the heck does that matter? So I would also finish with saying that it's more of an art than a science. I think that if we could figure that out at a higher level, we'd be more successful, as coaches, because it's really hard to tell. And like you said, especially as a kid's developing, what they're going to be, once they get here. And, it's why too, to go back to what we talked about before, it's absolutely craziness. The amount of responsibility that, and what we expect out of coaches when you're recruiting a 15-year-old, 16, 17-year-old, he commits and then he gets to college and he decides, it's the first time he's been in that type of environment, and he'd say, hey, you know what? I like drinking beer, and, I like socializing on campus with all the people that there are to socialize with. And now he's less motivated. Well, how the heck were you going to know that before he got to campus? I don't know. So that's what I said. It's more of an art than a science. And if anybody tells you otherwise, they're lying.
Well, Brandon, I could sit here and talk to you for the next 2 hours and pick your brain about all of these things, but I think we'll probably leave it there for now. Before we go, just real quick, Brandon, what do you predict for this season for Dartmouth lacrosse?
Yeah, I'm predicting this will be a big season for us. With the time that I've been here, we have a few years worth of recruits in, we have 10 out of 10 of our starters coming back. Okay. And, we're really trying to get ourselves out of a place that wasn't very good, for a long period of time. So I expect us to take a big step forward this year. I think we got some good leadership in the guys that we have coming back. I think we've had some guys that have laid some great foundation work in the classes that have come before them here in the last couple years. And, it feels a lot to me that a lot of stars are aligning for us. And, it's the most excited that I've been as a coach sitting in this chair at this time, talking to somebody with a season staring us down here in the next in the coming months. So I'm really excited, about what's ahead, this season and the next couple. Recruiting's going really well for us. This team's the best team that we're going to have in my time. Next year's going to be the best team that we've had in my time. And the year after that's going to be the next, the best team that we've had in my time. So it's a really exciting time to be a part of what we're building, here. And, I appreciate you asking and following and having me on the podcast.
Well, Brendan, I really appreciate for you being on the podcast, and best of luck the entire season and moving forward here with Dartmouth Lacrosse. Before I go, I definitely want to just give you a shout out as to, the type of individual that you are. When I came to Stony Brook, I was a walk-on, and I was sitting at a lunch table all alone, wondering if I could sit with the cool kids, and you took one look over and you said, "Hey, come sit over with us." And that meant all the world to a wet behind the ears lacrosse player who'd been playing for about 7 months and didn't know his ass from his elbow. So I really appreciate it. And that just tells the guy who you really are. And I told you this in person, but I'll tell everybody here that, I don't think anybody in the world has worked harder for this and is more appropriate for the position you're in right now. And I wish you all the best.
Hey man, it means a lot to me, and it's exciting to be able to do this and be able to pass on some of what we learned and what some of the things able to help you with as you got to school, and keep passing that on to guys, through the podcast and the stuff that you're doing, and through the guys I have a chance to work with. So much appreciated.
I appreciate it, Brendan. And I will talk to you soon, buddy.
All right, take care.
Take care. And there you have it. Thank you very much again, Brendan, for being on the podcast. Guys, if you like today's podcast, please subscribe, rate, review. These interviews come out every Thursday, and new content comes out Tuesday as well. We'll see you next time on the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast.